What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going over 5 tips to keep your church safer, okay? Now, in the last video where I talked about church, I talked about concealed carry, and we talked about, how and why you should be doing that and what guns to carry and, how to carry it and how to wear outfits with it and all that good stuff. Not really going to talk about guns quite as much in this video. We're going to talk about more mindset, things that you should keep in mind, things that your church should be doing to try to stay a little bit safer. Now, as always, bear in mind, I have no credentials aside from common sense. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm not a cop. I am not a former police officer. I have no military or law enforcement background. I'm a school teacher. I've been teaching for a while. And all I have is, like I said, common sense, things that I've learned from other people, though, that I'm basically relaying to you. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, but at the same time, be open-minded. These are just, again, some common sense things from one average Joe to another. Okay? So without further ado, let's get right into it. The number one tip that I think every church should make sure that they have covered is medical gear. Okay? Medical gear is very important. It doesn't matter if it's some sort of targeted attack, like an active shooter, or a fire, or, a medical emergency. There's a million different reasons why you might need medical gear at your church, okay? Anywhere where there's going to be a lot of people at one time, you probably need medical gear. I think it's probably a law in most states that churches and businesses and places like that and schools have to have first aid kits in certain places. But I'd imagine a lot of churches probably just do the bare minimum there. What do I mean by that? Well, they should have the right medical gear for obviously, minor stuff, Band-Aids and all that kind of stuff, but also for trauma, for an active shooter scenario, right? Treating gunshot wounds. So there should be tourniquets. There should be combat gauze. There should be, high-fin chest seals and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is really important, and I think that your church should really have a surplus of that stuff on hand. And it should be available to anybody in the church who knows what they're doing with it, okay? So that kind of stuff. You could also say that your church probably should have an AED for people with heart conditions or anything like that. Maybe even an EpiPen for kids or anybody that would get bit by a bee and forgot theirs at home or whatever. Just basic stuff like that is very important for a church, okay? And it can benefit you in any scenario. Then also on top of that, not only do you need the gear, but it's important for any church or any business, any institution, to have people there who know what they're doing with it, okay? That gear doesn't do you a whole lot of good if you don't know how to use it. So fortunately, there's a ton of information out there on the internet. There's also a ton of information through courses, free courses, and places that you can go and, get CPR certified and all that kind of stuff. But I think in your church, it's a good idea that hopefully you have some people there who might be medical professionals, maybe nurses, maybe doctors, maybe EMTs, even volunteer firefighters. Hopefully you have some people like that in your church, and those people are sort of identified in a role that they would be sort of, leading the charge in medical situations. Okay? Okay, so tip number 2, we're going to talk about threat assessment. What is threat assessment? Essentially, it is looking out there and, figuring out different scenarios of what sort of dangers you might be facing. Militaries do this all the time. Other institutions do it. Law enforcement does it. But it's essentially, it's like watching film in football, okay? The defense might have a certain formation, and in that formation, you might be looking at which guy might be blitzing on a different play. So you're figuring out what could be your threats. So with threat assessment, you're thinking about, are there people out there who want to do my church or my religion harm? Okay? Ask yourself a question. How many times do you watch the news after one of these mass shooting attacks or whatever, and you see people interviewed, and during the interviews they say that these are people who maybe went to school with the shooter or were their neighbors or knew them somehow, and these people always say, yeah, I kind of, noticed something was off with them all along, or they seemed a little bit weird, they were a little odd. Some people straight up say they weren't surprised that they would do something like this. And guys, that's really a shame. That happens way too often. If we're not surprised about something, then why do we let it happen, or why are we not prepared in the first place? Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff these people slip through the cracks of our system, and these things could have been prevented. So I always tell my students where I'm teaching at, if we're trying to stop mass shootings, the best way to do so, the best way to stop a mass shooter is to prevent it from happening in the first place. Okay? Once that person is through the door with a loaded gun, we've already failed. Okay? And at that point, it's damage control. The goal is to stop these things from happening before they take place. So figure out, in your community, are there people who are maybe targeting Christians or whatever religion you are? Maybe they've said some really crazy stuff online. Don't be afraid to say something. I know the cliche, if you see something, say something, but it really is true. If somebody seems like they're a little bit unhinged, maybe contact authorities or, whoever you think you need to contact. You could potentially be saving lives. Okay, so it's not about being mean or anything like that. Don't worry about that. If you see something, say something. And again, stopping these attacks from happening in the first place is really the way to go. Also, I think it's important with this topic, guys, most of the time, pretty much all the time, when these events take place, we always find out who the shooter is and everything. And they all have one thing in common, and that is that they don't care about life anymore. Okay? They are gone emotionally. They have no more morals. For whatever reason, they feel like they've been outcasted to the point where their life doesn't matter, other people's lives don't matter, and there is, no more sense of reality for these people. I'd imagine it takes a while to get to that place. I know there's medications and all kinds of stuff, and we can talk about mental health and all those things, but really it takes a while to get to that place. And so I think, especially as Christians or people at a church, you should just go out of your way in general to be nice to people, especially if you see somebody who maybe they're a little bit different. Maybe they don't seem to fit in as well. Maybe they do seem like they might have some mental issues or whatever. Guys, reach out and talk to those people. Try to, I'm not saying you have to be friends with them necessarily, but be cordial, be kind, be a little bit understanding, because those are the types of people that really are doing this that we have to watch out for. So in no way am I saying like take it easy on these people after it's already happened, but what I'm saying is, again, if we can prevent this from happening in the first place, that's the best bet. And I think that one of the ways to do that is to make these people feel human all the time. Now, at the end of the day, guys, there's not a whole lot we can do about some of these situations. So don't feel like, you have to put the world on your shoulders to try to do this. At the end of the day, if somebody wants to do something, they're going to, okay? I'm just saying that I think, before somebody goes out and commits something like this, or even commits self-harm, I think it's very important that we try to reach out to these people and, make them feel wanted or useful, okay? Okay, tip number 3. Make your church a harder target, okay? Arguably, I could have made this tip number 1, but these are all, kind of interchangeable. Make your church a harder target. What does that mean? Well, first of all, like I said, if you check out my other video, I think you should be concealed carrying at church if you're comfortable with doing so. If you're somebody that doesn't concealed carry, then don't worry about it. But if you're somebody who does, do it at church as well. Because churches are probably going to be, throughout the next few years, probably going to be one of the biggest targets here in America. Okay? So making sure that your church is not a gun-free zone. I don't care what your opinion is on guns and all that kind of stuff. The bottom line is most of these events occur in gun-free zones, okay? It happens at soft targets. So harden that target. Make sure that you're carrying at church. Preferably make sure that you have a security team. Other people, you're just one person. What happens if you're not there for the week or whatever? So make sure there's a group of people, I think, that are concealed carrying. One thing that our church did that has nothing to do with really concealed carry, but just common sense, and again, that's kind of the theme of this video, lock the church doors at certain times. So, for example, our church begins at 9:30. At about 9:32 or 9:33, a few minutes after service begins, the doors lock, okay, around the whole church. So what that means is you can't just walk into the building, okay? If you leave the building, you're going to have somebody let you back in. Sure, you could get in, but it would be a little bit more difficult, and there would at least be some loud noise. And the reason we do that is not to keep people away, okay? What we do is when those doors are locked, we have a guy who his entire job is to sit in the vestibule of our church and greet people as they come in the door. And he sits there during the whole service, and he lets people in if they're late, right? So we're not going to turn people away because they slept in a little bit or they, got a flat tire or whatever. So we'll let those people in, but obviously then this guy, that stands there, he can take a quick look at them, and chances are he can probably tell if they're a good guy or bad guy. So I think that's a really important thing. That's one way to harden your church a little bit. So yeah, having weapons to fight back with and locking the doors is really two giant things for hardening your target, your church. Security cameras, all that kind of stuff. Those are also great too, okay? So it's just the general idea of hardening your target. Tip number 4 is to know your church, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, know where all your exits are, know the layout of your church, know how long of a shot you'd have to take if you were, at one end of the sanctuary to another end of the sanctuary. Not only the building, don't just figure out the layout of the church, but also know the people in your church, okay? The church is the people, right? Get to know everybody. At my church, it's small enough, I pretty much know everybody, or at least know who they are. I just don't really talk to them that much. So that is a very important thing. If you know everybody, then somebody is going to stick out. Somebody new. Somebody's going to stick out and not look quite right. They're going to look a little bit out of place. And that's a good thing for your church. Now, if you go to a much bigger church, it's a little bit more difficult. But that's one of the things. You got to get to know the people in your church, no matter the size, and be social in that. And it's good to get to know the other people. Okay. And finally, rule number 5, situational awareness. What is situational awareness? It basically means just be alert about what's around you. Okay. Be one of those weird people that's always looking around back and forth, okay? Pretend you're checking the clock. If people really are, upset about you checking the clock, then figure out something else. But, do whatever it takes to keep your head on a swivel and be paying attention about what's around you. Fortunately, in church, hopefully, at least, you're not buried in your phone like we are a lot of other times. But, just keep your head up. Understand what's going on. If you see somebody walking by a window, look, see what's going on, okay? Is it just a normal person or is it a bad guy, okay? Not only that, but maybe you want to pick strategic seating, okay? Maybe you want to sit towards the back in a certain area so you can see everything in front of you and kind of watch everything take place, and then be in a strategic position so that you'd also be closer to anybody coming through the door. Or maybe, on the other hand, maybe you want to sit towards the front because those people in the back are going to be in the line of fire right away. So that's up to you. You got to figure that out. But this is just some things to think about. And then finally, the last part of situational awareness that we're going to talk about here is to have a plan. And that's sort of how we're going to end this video, is make sure that you have a plan, okay? No matter what, if you have a plan, you're doing better than somebody who doesn't have a plan, right? So you figure out in your head what happens if somebody comes through that door. What am I going to do? Am I going to fight back? Am I going to run? Am I going to hide? All that kind of stuff. Just figure it out. Figure it out with your church. Figure it out with your church security team if you have one. I think it's a very, very important thing for us to do, is to always have a plan, and not just a plan, but a backup plan as well, okay? And so that's pretty much it, guys. I guess one honorable mention that probably should be rule number one is keep it in your prayers. Think about it. Pray about it. Pray for your church to be safe. And, that's a very important thing that we should not overlook, okay? So, as always, if you guys enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below with your ideas. We'll have a meaningful discussion in the comments section. And keep an eye out for my other videos in this similar category or this similar topic. So, as always, guys, have a good night and keep blasting.